Hey fam, welcome to the Freetrail Podcast and our new presenting sponsor. We're so happy to now be working with The Feed. Thefeed.com/Freetrail is where you need to go. It is the one-stop shop for all your training and racing nutrition needs. They have over 200 of the world's best nutrition brands stocked in one website. It's a fantastic resource. We've been big customers for a long time. We're really proud to work with them. Some of my favorite products that you can find at thefeed.com/Freetrail. Gnarly Nutrition Whey Protein Powder. I like the chocolate flavor. I have some of this after every one of my workouts and long runs. For in-run nutrition, Orange Drank. You'll see my big dumb face on it. Also from Gnarly Nutrition, enhanced sodium concentration here in the world's best fueling drink mix. Finally, HVMN, Ketone IQ. I have 2 of these ketone shots basically every single day, once before I go running and once in the middle of the afternoon when I need a little extra energy. Go to thefeed.com/Freetrail and you're going to get an $80 credit, free money to spend at thefeed.com. It'll be $20 right away and then $20 every 90 days thereafter. You'll also get a sweet Trail Running Will Save the World water bottle. Again, that's thefeed.com/Freetrail. You'll get $80 credit to spend on your favorite nutrition products. And if you are international, they do ship internationally as well. So you can take care or at least take advantage of that great offering from The Feed. Big thanks to The Feed for supporting and thank you for watching the podcast. Jasmin Paris, welcome to the Freetrail Podcast. It's so great to meet you.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, you are just getting home, celebrating an incredible achievement, finishing the Barkley Marathons last week, becoming the 20th human being, the first woman to achieve that feat. Truly one of the most riveting moments that I could remember as I was furiously updating Keith Dunn's Twitter account as thousands of other people were around the world. I don't know you personally. Like I said, we are just meeting. You don't post a lot on social media, and I'm sure there's a ton of people who would love to get to know you a little bit more. So as you know, my opening question here, Jasmin, is what makes you in moments of introspection? What are the defining attributes of your character?
I guess I feel most at home in the mountains and in wild places. Where I guess we kind of strip away civilization and we're just left with kind of scale and wilderness and nature. And I think I guess in that way I like simple things. I like the kind of simple pleasures of space and freedom and nature and beauty. I don't need a lot of stuff. That's really what makes me happiest, those kind of outdoor places. And I think in terms of personality, I am determined, I'm driven. If I want to do something, I give it my 100%, and it's always been that way, regardless of whether it's a piece of work at school or whether it's trying to run the Barkley Marathon. So if I'm if I'm up for it, then I'm doing it with everything that I've got. And and I really like people to be happy. I like things to be fair. I want to make the world a better place. And I love my kids.
What a perfect introduction. And yes, a love for being outdoors and for wild places, plus determination. It makes 60 hours on the Barkley Marathon course probably feel a little bit more comfortable when that is your inborn disposition as a human being. Starting on the personal side, I read that you're a veterinarian, and this is maybe part of your love for wild places and love for the natural world. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with animals over time and how that ended up being your career path?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I was really, I don't know if you know the James Herriot books, but that kind of idea of being a country vet and spending lots of time outside and going around farms and sort of thing. That was, I really liked that idea when I was a small child. I mean, I wanted to be a vet from primary school when I was really quite small. And as time went on and I went to vet school, things obviously changed and I ended up doing small animal medicine. So it's a bit different. But yeah, I love to be around animals. I love their kind of, I love the way that they trust, and I love the way that, that they kind of like are straightforward in I guess I also love just I enjoy kind of medical questions. I've always been fascinated by medicine and disease. So kind of dealing with animals is to say, kind of animal disease is kind of the perfect combination. That sounds a little.
That's interesting because I also read that, you were a PhD and I think you did your dissertation on leukemia. I also read that your parents were academic, I think mathematicians. So maybe tell us a little bit about that academic background and to what extent that has informed your career path and the person you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I did actually, so in terms of being a vet, I sort of worked for a year as a vet in sort of general practice, and then I went on to specialise. I went for a year to the States to do an internship, and then I came back to Edinburgh here in Scotland and did a residency in small animal internal medicine, and then did my European diploma exams. So I'm a kind of specialist vet, and I work at a university hospital that's a referral hospital, and I guess that's already kind of starting down the line of academia. Like I knew that I enjoy learning all the time. I'm fascinated by questions, and I like to kind of practice evidence-based medicine. And there's so much we don't know answers for at the moment, certainly in veterinary medicine, but even in human medicine. And I enjoy kind of exploring those concepts. I enjoy having those conversations with other people. I enjoy the kind of mental challenge of it on a daily basis. I don't want to I think I just get bored slipping into kind of doing the same thing every day. So that's kind of why I wanted to stay in academia. And doing a PhD is a natural kind of path if you want to stay in academia anyway. And I was really excited about spending 3 years just doing researching something and getting to know something in real depth and detail, and being the person. Essentially, doing a PhD, you tend to end up being the person, one of the few people that knows, the most about that one very niche subject. But that kind of excited me, and it's nice. It kind of fits with my personality of liking to do things properly and getting really kind of deep into something and really giving it everything. So, I did my PhD on YTHDF2, which is an RNA methylation, is a reader, so protein. So it was kind of a little bit niche, and that was in kind of hematopoiesis and leukemia, so in blood cancer. And now I work as an academic vet. So I work at the university hospital, and I do some clinical work. So then I'm kind of supervising junior specialists, but I'm also then doing some research. So that's working in a lab, looking at human liver disease. So it's kind of a nice balance of still kind of spreading, like kind of questioning mind and getting to sort of work on the cutting edge of research, and at the same time sort of paying something back into the kind of clinical setting and keeping my clinical skills alive, and actually just that contact with animals, because ultimately I do enjoy spending time with animals and making them better, and that's the people as well, that obviously you're helping the people whose animals they are as well. So I enjoy, I do giving my bit back to them as well.
Lovely. It's probably obvious to our listeners now, the through line here, but maybe you could say about a few words about how the love of learning and the multi-year deep research and how that maybe shows up in a project like the Barkley or like some of the other things that you do athletically. It obviously takes a lot of experience and learning and practical application of skills in order to achieve what you've just achieved. Does that lifelong learning attribute also show up in your athletic career?
Yeah, absolutely, especially for a project like Barkley, because Barkley's, it's not like it's not like you're going to a race and just kind of following a set route or following a GPS or a marked course and just running as fast as you can to the end, because it's so different, and there's so much to kind of you have to learn. Like, I definitely feel that the kind of the times that I went to Barkley, the 3 times I've been there, I've successively got better and I've learned from my mistakes. And that was a big difference this year. This 3rd time was that I had that kind of background to fall back on, and all those kind of those previous mistakes that I'd made really kind of they really gave me the kind of grounding to know when I was about to make a mistake and to recognize when I'd made a mistake and correct it early. Because I think ultimately at Barkley, everybody makes mistakes. I mean, I ran with I'm sure they won't mind me saying it, but like, it's not as if John and Jared didn't make any mistakes either. But the key was that they very quickly corrected them if they did make a mistake. So I think that's the kind of key of it. So that, at Barkley, it's about that in terms of navigation. It's about, but it's also about kind of, it's the planning beforehand. It's all the, it's kind of the preparation down to kind of the detail. Because you can't, there's so much uncertainty in that race in terms of things like the weather, that you have to get everything right that you can get right. Everything that's within your control, you have to have nailed that, and then you're only leaving the kind of things to chance that really have to be left to chance.
Yeah.
In terms of planning.
So we'll get to some of the learnings from your previous 2 attempts here in a little bit. But first, I was reading your interview with I Run Far, and you said that a couple months before the Barkley, you just had this feeling that you were going to finish this year. And it struck me as something that we should dig into here on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about that intuition. Like, how did that feeling show up in your preparation, and how did it impact your confidence going into this year's Barkley?
Yeah, and I mean, it's absolutely true. This year there was something different. I think it was sort of end of January, start of February time. And I think partly it was just that I started feeling good in training. Like, I started to kind of get that, I guess, that feeling of flow sometimes that you get. And when you sort of start to feel like running up a hill is kind of fun, you want to do it again. And I was doing quite a lot of these kind of, I guess by the time February came, I was starting to do quite a lot of these kind of long runs that involved basically a lot of hill repeats to try and get as much climbing in as I could. And I just found that I was actually just really enjoying going uphill, and I was really enjoying the climb and the kind of the challenge of it. And it was almost like, what can I do to kind of make this harder, like make this kind of a challenge? And there was one particular morning when when it was, I went to bed at like 8 p.m. with the same time as my son, and I slept for 4 hours and got up at midnight, and it was like hammer it down with rain outside. It was 1 degree. And I went out, and the dog was a bit like, are you sure you want to go out now in the middle of the night? But we went out, and I was dressed in like full waterproofs, all the gear. And I knew that the minute I started to climb, it was going to turn to snow, because it was just about the 1 degree, and it did. And it was really kind of battering it down. And I was really like acutely aware at that point that this was really crazy. Like, most people would think this was completely bonkers, and at the same time, but I just pushed on, and it was just a complete whiteout. It was complete blizzard by the time I got to the top of the hill, and then I dropped down, and then I basically did 17 times up this hill overnight. And up and down this hill, and sometime kind of in the night, in the early hours, it was super slippy, because the grass was kind of wet, and there was snow on top, and I couldn't keep my feet because I was on quite a steep slope purposefully to be practicing for Barkley. So I did I had these long like sledge runs down, and I kind of, most of my descents were like on my bottom, but then later in the night it got colder, and it kind of was just falling as kind of powdery snow. So then it changed, and then I was just running down again. In the morning it was like all white, and it was beautifully cold and fantastic, like sunrise and an amazing night. And I guess, the fact that I just stuck it out and did my, 9 hours of reps or whatever it was, 8.5 hours of reps, and it was about 5,000 meters, just under. But it was just something about, that knowledge. And it actually, in a way, was kind of fun. I sort of finished it, and I took the kids swimming at like 10:30, which is part of the reason I went out overnight, and they did their usual swimming session. But part of me, like, that kind of inner kind of warm feeling when you've done something big, because it doesn't always have to be a race. Sometimes it can just be a training session. And it was like that one was like a prime example of just like that kind of, it was just like stored away, that knowledge that I'd done that, and that it was okay, and that I actually quite enjoyed it in a kind of slightly masochistic way. And at the end of it, there was this fantastic kind of reward of the morning and the snow. So I don't know. I think sessions like that, you do something like that, and then it kind of all adds up. You kind of store that away, and that knowledge, that kind of self-confidence that you've got that behind you, is really good sort of to go forward to Barkley with. I think I might have gone off the point, but anyway, was that sort of answer your question?
That was perfect. And I loved in particular that inner warm feeling that you get when you've done something big. I'm sure that's something that every single person who is listening to this can identify with. Maybe to drive the point home a little bit further, the words that you use in the I Run Far interview was that you had an inner certainty. So coming back to this confidence and this intuition, like, it felt like a powerful
powerful way to articulate like this deep belief. So maybe if there's anything you can say about the nature versus nurture of that inner certainty, like, do you have a predisposition to believe that you're capable of these seemingly impossible things, or does it arise in tandem with the training and the fitness that you accumulate with sessions like you just described?
I definitely think it's a combination of things. So like, I think it was, I went to Barkley the first time not knowing at all what to expect, because, lots of people said a woman couldn't finish it and that sort of thing. But I came away from that mainly thinking, I think it's possible that a woman can finish that. I need things to, to fit together. So I think in some ways, I guess that's kind of me intrinsically like believing in myself. So I definitely I've and this comes back to kind of the whole thing about being a woman and going to Barkley. And I was brought up the same as my brothers, and has never had any reason to believe that I was capable of anything less. And I never have thought that, it's never really struck me that I can't do something because I'm a woman. So it's more that I just like, and I also sort of don't follow what people say in terms of what the limits are. It's more that I want to go there and see what I think and then test what I can do for myself. If you know what I mean? I guess I just go and see what I can do and then establish in my mind what my limits are based on what I think rather than what people tell me it should be. So I guess I'm saying that is I kind of had I kind of have a good degree of inner confidence about things, especially kind of being in the mountains and like my ability to move through the mountains, just because that's something that feels like safe and for me is like natural. I think that's just somehow something that I was kind of brought up with, and it feels like that is something that I'm comfortable doing, and I'm, I might not be comfortable talking a lot about fashion or bands or like in films, celebrities, but that, being kind of moving across the mountains and moving fast on rough terrain and that sort of thing, that's something that's like totally me. So yeah, I had the self-confidence, but then on top of that, I think this year just went well in terms of training. I did a lot of strength work. I felt strong, and I just didn't feel tired. I'd had this kind of lingering low grade sort of intermittent tiredness for the last couple of years, and it was subtle, and I did lots of things, so it's not like I'm not one to make a big deal out of it, but for me it was noticeable. So when it sort of went away in November, December last year, then it was a big difference because I suddenly felt like really energetic again. So yeah, that was the other kind of key thing that I knew going into Barkley this year, was that I had this, like, just felt really good again. So I sort of felt like, I almost felt like sort of invincible, and
yeah.
Looking back, it seems like in some ways, I think, well, was I too self-confident? But really for me in my mind, the main kind of risk was that the weather was going to be awful, because I knew that would mess everything up. But then when people said the forecast is good, I was like, well, kind of this attempt's on, and I was like, yeah, I felt like kind of quietly confident that I could do it. But you never knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll get to it, but the margin was as slim as it could possibly be. And so going in with that confidence and that inner certainty, I think it's something for people to tune into. I know certainly there's been moments in my career where you just have an intuition that you're ready for a good one, and tuning into that feeling, it's often accurate. I've never been to the Barkley, though I've followed it for 15 years at this point. And one of the things you always hear about is the importance of experience on the course. You'd been to Barkley twice. You completed 7 laps combined in those 2 trips. How did those 2 experiences inform how you prepared this year? Did you do anything differently that you think made a difference coming back to the learning from the first 2 attempts?
Well, I mean, apart from the fact that, the navigation, you've kind of, that's improved by doing those loops already. I think the main thing was probably more climbing. Like, there's not actually that much running on Barkley. The ironic thing is that when you do get to somewhere where you can run, you do have to run because you've not got very much time. So it's not like it's not like it's a walking race, because you do have to run when you can, and you have to run the downhills. But you do a lot of hiking uphill. So if you look at the time you spend doing anything, then most of it is hiking uphill, I'm sure. So like if you kind of want to train for anything, I think that's like the thing to focus on in terms of trying to minimize your time on each loop. So I think I just did more reps. I still did those sessions I was still doing like a weekly session, which was like more kind of speed, either kind of flat intervals or like some hills, but kind of maybe like 2 or 3 minute type hills. It wasn't, I was still doing a kind of fast session each week as well. And then usually with a long run, some speed work, some like built into that as well. But I definitely just basically was doing more climb. And I even did kind of sessions in the gym. So I would do a session in the morning, a fairly like, I guess towards the kind of peak weeks, my kind of runs might have been 10, even 12 miles in the morning. But then I would be doing like 1,000 meters in the stair climber in the gym just before getting the kids from nursery, which I could just about manage. I'd do about 40 minutes or whatever. Then I would kind of get the double training, but it would be for, just climbing in the gym in the evening. And I also did more strength work. And the thing was, I was more consistent with strength work, because I've sort of been doing that for years, but like I was just more consistent. I was doing it 3 times a week, and I was also doing it with weights. So that made a big difference, because I've not really done it weighted very much in the past, but I'd actually started just using weights properly. So I just felt stronger and all around, which I think was a good thing.
Awesome. I read your blog post from last year's Barkley, and there was an excerpt that I want to read here and have you respond to, because it feels really important. And you're describing the moment that you finish lap 4 after being sort of timed out, and you walk back into camp with your friend and coach, Damian Hall. And what it says in your blog is, when I reached the gate, Laz looked at me inquiringly and asked whether I still thought I could do 5 loops. I looked at him and replied honestly that I thought I could. He smiled. Period. It feels like that moment is imprinted in your mind. Any words you want to say about, coming to the gate after doing 4 loops, sort of timing out? You're with your buddy, Damian Hall, and you're having this exchange with Laz before, obviously, your successful attempt this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's very memorable. And, you think about that when you come back to try again, and when you see Laz again, and Carl, who's now kind of helping Laz or taking over. I knew that Laz really wanted a woman to finish, even though he said that woman couldn't. So, like, I think, like in that smile, I guess there was like maybe pleasure at the thought that I might, but also a kind of goading, like, you haven't yet, so show us, and like all those things. Maybe at least that's what I kind of interpreted from it. There was like still the challenge there to, well, go on and show us, kind of do it. I mean, Laz, that time after my 4th loop, I offered to show him my pages, and he was like, well, what's the point? You've not done 4 loops. So he didn't want to see them, and I was there still wanting to offer up my pages for counting, because I, in my opinion, I'd done, I'd finished the 4th loop, even if it was over time. But from his point of view, it's not like there was no point in counting the pages because I've not finished. So, he definitely knows how to kind of like, how to keep you motivated to try again, and like to prove him wrong, or to prove that someone can finish, a woman can finish.
I love it, because as you write it and you describe him smiling, to me, I can imagine this twinkle in his eye of him knowing that you're still determined, that you're not, accepting this failure, having completed 4 loops, but over time, and that you still had the belief. And him smiling is maybe the signal of like, she's not done, she's coming back. I still believe in her. It's possible. So cool. So to the race itself, and building off this conversation about Laz, you said in the Iron Far article also that everything he does is to increase uncertainty for the runners. And for a lot of us who've just watched the race from afar, it's kind of hard to understand why the race is so hard, right? Because it's like in this park in Tennessee, it's not like in the San Juan Mountains or in Chamonix with the Alps, etc. And so using this uncertainty idea as a way to describe what makes Barkley so hard, I wanted you to expand on that. Like, how does the uncertainty show up practically when you're at Barkley, and how do you interface with that uncertainty personally during the event?
I mean, I think this is tiered. There's so many levels at which this kind of uncertainty plays out. So, I mean, for people that don't know, like, you obviously have to find out how to get into it, so which I'm not going to expand on. But even that's like, there's not many races where you don't know how to get in. And then once you, once you kind of are there, there's lots of things. You get given a watch. Well, that's once it kind of that's actually in the morning of the race. But once you get there, you kind of get given a watch once the conch is blown. So I probably should do it in time order. So firstly, you don't know what the time start is going to be for the race. So you'll register, you'll kind of copy the route map the kind of day before in the afternoon, and then you go to sleep. And you don't know whether you're going to get woken up at midnight or whether you're going to get woken up like 10 hours after that. And actually that's really difficult because it's difficult to kind of relax and sleep, because what happens is you wake up and then suddenly you think it's going to happen any second, and then immediately like completely awake, and then it doesn't happen and you have to go back to sleep. And what actually happened this year was the car alarm went off sometime in the morning, and everybody got up, like everybody got dressed. Like I was shouted to Damien and Jim, who were in the tents next to me, and Conrad got up, and like I got completely dressed, and then suddenly somebody came past and said it's a false alarm, it was a car alarm. So we all went back to sleep. But then it's difficult to kind of switch off because immediately your adrenaline levels are super high, so that's the first kind of challenge of it. Then once he does blow the conch, you've got an hour to get ready. So then suddenly there's like it feels like quite a rush to get ready, and you have to go and get your watch. And this year, like last year, he just goes to, I think he goes to like a local shop, whether it's Target or something, and he buys like 40 of these watches, and they're all really variable. So I think the first year I got this huge watch, like really big on my wrist, and this year I actually had quite a small ladies' watch. And this year my watch was such that I couldn't, it was quite a nice watch, but I could only see the screen when I turned it in a certain angle to the light. So like you just look at it from a kind of distance in a normal way. I couldn't see what time it was. So it would kind of involve quite a lot of adjusting the kind of angle and the kind of light levels to be able to actually see what time it was. And actually Tomo ran past me, he's another runner that goes every year, at one point, and he asked me how much time do I have. He was running back into camp and I was going out, and he said I've not got a watch. So I don't know what happened to his watch, but it just goes to show that these watches, I guess, are maybe not that reliable. And there was one watch this year, and we knew that there was going to be one watch that was like a touch screen, and Laz had sort of posted that this was going to be a nightmare for anyone. The minute you touched it, it was going to, the time was going to disappear, and you wouldn't have any idea what time it was on the race anymore, So you go there to collect your watch, and you think, do I go early? Do I go late once the touch screen's gone? Like, I mean, obviously, it's not going to make any difference really, like in the grand scheme of things, but because you're either going to get it or you're not. But so that's kind of the element with the watches. And then all the way through, the books that he puts out tend to have these kind of slightly bizarre titles. To be honest, this year I didn't even register the titles really. Most of them had something to do with dogs, like waiting for the dogs or something like that. But I remember kind of generally they'll kind of be along the themes of desolation and abandonment and despair and last hope and that sort of thing. So if you do look at the titles, they're not exactly like uplifting titles.
It's like the letter of condolences that you receive when you get accepted into the race. Yeah,
exactly. You get a letter of condolences, and the first thing you see it, and you're like, oh no, I didn't get in, and then you're like, oh no, that means I've got in, and you have to remind yourself that that's what it is. So it's all like these kind of twisted things. And then there's you're looking for the books and. There was a new section to the course this year, so he'd sort of there was some kind of, post beforehand about sort of I guess to incite fear about what this new section was going to be like and that sort of thing. So you're always left in this kind of uncertainty. I think that's what he's brilliant at generating is uncertainty.
So that's what I wanted to build on, because to me, in your description of it, it means that you have to be comfortable with uncertainty to be successful at the Barkley. And if I were to reverse engineer it, what that means is that you kind of need to have a good attitude, in addition to being fit, to having navigation skills, to being incredibly tough, to being intelligent. There's an attitude component to it, to be amenable to uncertainty, to remain open-minded and flexible, knowing that there's going to be layers of uncontrollables that will emerge out there. Anything you want to say about that? Am I touching on something there? Was there something about your attitude this year that maybe contributed to success?
Yeah, no, I think you've really kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of you have to be able to cope with uncertainty. And that, that's also from the point of view of like, I think this race, more than any other, you will come across challenges that will like really knock you back. It's like, kind of, you'll get lost or something bad will happen. And I think the key thing that, like, I don't know, my personal feeling is that the key thing about someone that finishes Barkley is someone that can get over that and move on, like get over it and move past it. And in terms of the uncertainties that LAS generates beforehand, actually compared with the course itself, they're actually like quite minor. Like I don't, I think that in terms of the challenge of the actual course and all the challenges that you're going to face out there when you're on the loops, that is actually minor, but it is an extra thing. So if you can just let that wash over you and completely let that not bother you, and then when you get out on the course, then focus on trying to use that skill to kind of navigate uncertainty, to actually just get past those hurdles and just pick yourself up, realign and carry on. Because I think that's what really gets people, is that things will go wrong out there. Like you will for sure have problems at some point, whether it's navigation or some kit happens or you get injured or whatever else. But like you will have problems, and I think that's the point, is that you need to somehow work out a way around it. That's why I think it's sort of like requires sort of problem solving and kind of the ability to sort of just kind of come up with solutions, I guess, when you're faced with problems like that.
All right, so building off this a little bit and coming back to your academic background, there's a funny theme at the Barkley Marathons where finishers seem to have very high IQs. In other words, there's many PhDs like yourself who have finished the Barkley Marathons. John Kelly is a PhD data scientist. Jared Campbell, Brett Mon, I think, sort of fits in this category with postgraduate degrees and very complicated, often engineering-focused jobs, in your case, working in the medical field. Can you describe how the Barkley sort of becomes an intellectual or a math problem, right? Because I'd love to hear you describe, to the extent you can, like doing the time and distance calculations to gauge the likelihood of finishing under 60 hours, because like we said, the margin is razor thin.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely a lot of calculation that goes on around. I mean, you hear John Kelly will be saying things out loud in terms of the splits and things like that. He's kind of got that all down. Like I personally, I was calculating all the way through the last loop, and certainly from 6 hours out, like I had it down to almost a minute of like how long I could afford to spend at each place. And I knew it was like, and honestly, when I got to the fire tower, I knew I was like down to, it was minutes. Like I knew that it was going to be super close. And I'd set myself like cutoffs for that. I needed to be like in the next valley and then on the next summit. And then kind of like, I had that all kind of, to the second pretty much, and I was actually just hitting exactly the times that I needed to be at those places, so I knew it was going to be pretty tight. But I think in terms of that kind of way of thinking, that scientific way of thinking, I think it actually applies as well to the navigation, because it's actually, I think being an orienteer is useful there. It's good to be good at navigating and to have that experience. But a lot of this is actually memory of like remembering certain features and things like that as well. So it's kind of like, it's almost like you have to be able to sort of log all those things in your mind as you go around and kind of use those natural features and things to kind of guide you. As well as doing kind of the standard navigation with a compass and a map and things. It's just that there's so much that's not on the map at Barkley. I think everybody knows that. Like if you look at the map, it's like green and there's contours to show that you're going up and down hills. I mean, it's like it doesn't show any of the stuff, all the like little cliffs and stuff. Well, they call them high walls, but all the bits like that where you get to it and you have no idea whether to go left or right is going to be a better way to try and get through it. Things like that, there's kind of, it's almost like a maze that you have to remember your way through. And the only way to really remember, to kind of negotiate it, is to remember what you did last time and then reverse it the opposite direction. So that's having to reverse all those cues the other way and learn new ones for the opposite direction.
I love that analogy also of being in a maze too, because I'm sure after each lap it gets harder as your mental faculties deteriorate to remember whether you went right or left, and then reverse engineer whether that means you need to go right or left the next time. So I guess also on this subject, there were an unprecedented 5 finishers this year. Ihor Veris finished first, and he had about 75 minutes to spare. You made it entertaining to the last second, finishing with 99 seconds to go.
I got like $1.60's worth, didn't I, really, out there?
$1.60. Unbelievable. Yeah, I saw a joke that somebody said, I think it was Keith posted it, that he overheard in camp that Laz should raise the price to $1.61 after this year. But anyway, what I was going to say is, like, I don't know, to me also as somebody who's been observing from afar, it's incredible that 5 people finished, but it's also incredible that everybody finished with less than 75 minutes to spare. And to me, that feels like a math problem too for Laz, where he truly is threading the needle of keeping it possible, but on the most razor thin of margins. Do you have an understanding of how he's able to do that? Because again, it's not obvious to those of us who are watching from afar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you kind of, again, hit the nail on the head. I mean, John Kelly posted something about this as well, didn't he? Because he pointed out for people that saying maybe it was easy this year or so, that the kind of the fastest loop time somebody ever finished was like 52 hours something. And their kind of extra time there was greater than the cumulative extra time, leftover time that the 5 finishers had this year. So that clearly it's not like it has got easier. I think you're right. And obviously the weather. So like if the weather, given how close all those 5 finishers were to the finish, if the weather had been bad, then nobody would have finished. So, you only needed kind of thick fog for a loop or two, and that would have cost everybody that amount of time, and nobody would have finished. So, you're right. I think Laz, I guess part of it is that he's done it enough times to have seen it in kind of different weather patterns, and they sort of sitting, and we've had good weather for the last couple of years. So I think, I'm sure that Barkley's just going to throw at us a terrible weather year. And that's why I don't think that he's going to make it dramatically harder, because if he does that and the weather's not quite as good, then nobody will come anywhere near finishing. And I think he does want to keep it like, he doesn't want to make it impossible, because if he just makes it harder and harder to the point that nobody can finish, then it stops being attractive to anyone. There's, it'd be like the first time that I went, and if I'd gone and I was like, this is absolutely impossible, there's no way I can do this, I would never have wanted to go back, because there's no point in trying something if it's impossible. But it's that kind of intrigue of knowing that it's just tantalizingly just possible. But that's what we aim for.
This is why I think it's captured the imagination of so many people. I mean, so Ihor, I just pulled up the finishing times and the margins for each of you. So again, Ihor finished with about 75 minutes to spare. John Kelly, who finished for the 3rd time, finished with 45 minutes to spare. Jared Campbell, who is a 4-time finisher now, only had 30 minutes. Greg Hamilton had about 22, and you had about a minute and a half. It's just unbelievable. So take us into the moment with Jared Campbell in between laps 4 and 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was an incredible moment, a kind of a real example, I guess, of the kind of spirit of our sport. And I guess what's the best parts of our sport, and it just mirrors really what I've experienced out on the trails with those guys on loops, 2, 3, 4 when I was running with them. But basically, Jared, I came in, John Kelly and Damien and Greg all pretty much headed out like very shortly after I got in, and I was in a kind of a bit of a mess, and I was like, I don't really know how to kind of deal with it. I've not really got enough time to sort myself out. I said, I'm going to have a 3-minute power nap. And I tried to eat something, and I couldn't really eat. I tried to eat my pasta. I tried to eat my porridge, drank some Coke. And I started eating a rice pudding, and sort of like I semi fell asleep in this power nap. But then somebody said, Jared's, I sort of asked, is anyone still here? And they said, yeah, Jared's still here. He's getting ready to go. And then someone said to me, if you want to go clockwise, you need to go now. And that was before Jared came over. And I guess I was sitting there. Maybe part of me also felt like it wouldn't, I don't know if it would have even, I would have sort of felt bad if I'd felt great to kind of jump up and steal the kind of clockwise direction without asking. But actually what happened was kind of, the most wonderful thing is that, I mean, I wasn't capable of getting up at that moment. So I was just like, he's just going to go clockwise and that's going to be it. But like a few minutes later, he came up to the gate. And at that point, I'd sort of managed to force down this rice pudding. And he said, you know, if you're ready, if you're nearly ready, clockwise, you know, clockwise is yours if you want it, which was basically like offered me the chance of going clockwise. And for anybody that doesn't know that's listening, clockwise is, you know, regarded by, it's basically it's easier. I mean, it's all relative in terms of Barkley terms, but it's easier because the last three big climbs are not beasts in the way that they are on the anti-clockwise direction. Okay. So it was a massive kind of offering to me, and it was incredibly kind, incredibly generous. And I was aware of that, and I kind of like, I got up and I wanted to, like, I was like, thanked him, and I was trying to say something, but then I basically threw up in my hand and like took it to the side, like wiped it on the grass and said, I'm sorry. And then like to everybody around, because I felt bad. And then I like took my banana from Conrad and just went to Carl and said, I'm ready to go. So it was like, I was definitely not in the best state. And then I just set off up the trail, kind of like wobbling off up the trail, trying to eat my banana. Yeah. And so I managed to eat the banana, and then I set off up the steep climb again. And I really, like I said to myself out loud, come on, now we can do this. Like you can do this. And then I was like back in the game again. But I think like partly, I mean, Jared's, I think that in itself just was enough to give me that kind of shove I needed. And to be honest, if he hadn't offered that, who knows how long would I've stayed sitting there. And then even regardless of the fact that I was anti-clockwise or clockwise, I probably would have spent too long in camp to finish anyway. So like it on so many levels, he helped me out by doing that. And I'm so grateful to him. So genuinely.
What an incredible show of sportsmanship. And now he's got 4 finishes and potentially the assist on your first finish. And what a great champion he is. And it makes the story even better now to know that you threw up into your own hand and then gave yourself a pep talk as you're walking out of camp. And then, of course, you close the loop and finish it out. Before we get to the finish, I wondered if on the 5th lap, because people are going clockwise and counterclockwise, if you crossed paths with any of your fellow finishers, and if so, if you could take us into those moments, any encouragement or conversations that are exchanged.
Yeah, well, firstly, I sort of wondered whether I might see Damien somewhere like his light or anything ahead of me. And I didn't on the first hill. I almost made the same mistake that I made last year on the 4th loop, going to the second book. And I realised in time, because I'd made that mistake before, I corrected it and I hit it spot on. And I remember thinking, because it was pitch black still at that point, I remember thinking, that could have been a disaster. And I hope Damien didn't make a mistake there, because I know, you know, like he obviously had some difficulties last year on the 5th loop. And then I climbed up and I was sort of expecting I might see his light ahead of me, and I didn't. And I looked back into the valley several times to see whether I could see his light down there, and I didn't. So I was hoping he was ahead of me. And then I did see the others. I saw the others and kind of like, I guess they were more than halfway. I was probably less than halfway. I don't know, maybe about halfway. And I saw John Kelly. I saw Greg and John Kelly, and then I saw Jared. And so I did see them all. John Kelly was very encouraging. He was like, yeah, you're doing great, you know, keep going, you can do this type thing. But then I think afterwards, when he wrote in his blog that he wasn't very hopeful that I was going to finish, that based on my time, he didn't think that I would finish. But in terms of me, he actually was really encouraging. Like he didn't leave me feeling like he left me feeling like I'm doing okay. So I think he did the perfect kind of pep.
The data scientist, he's doing the math in his head, and you disproved it. You proved that his algorithm that he was running on the 3-time Barkley Marathon finisher brain was inaccurate. Anyway, keep going. I'd love to hear more about this.
Yeah. So that, I mean, it was a really brief exchange, but it was nice. It sort of felt like, it just felt fun in a way. Like it was, you know, because we'd shared that so many, like, I mean, I ran with John for like a good 2 loops, and I ran with Jared and Greg for like a loop. So and I've run with Jared before as well. So it definitely felt like kind of, like, you know, you sort of make incredible friendships out on these trails, even though you don't really get that much time to talk. It's just this shared experience. So it was really good to see them. It was really good to see them making good progress. And I was kind of inspired onwards to keep going. I think Jared, I said, like, you doing okay? And he said, yeah, I'm doing okay, or something like that. And we just kind of smiled and like passed each other. Yeah, and it was like it was around then that I think I started to kind of like the calculation became clearer to me, and it became clearer that it was going to be how tight it was going to be. And so like I made kind of I guess I just started pushing. So it sort of became more of as much as it can be at that point in the race, it became more of a tempo run than an easy run. And like in the sense that, I mean, it wasn't moving that fast, but it felt like a tempo run in terms of effort. Like I was breathing harder, yeah, and I was just pushing harder. And one thing that was really noticeable was I had a bit of tendonitis developing in my left leg, and I actively made myself ignore it. Like I told myself, you know, it's a signal, it's a nerve signal to your brain. It doesn't mean anything. You can still run through it. It just hurts, so ignore it. And the reason was that, you know, if you kind of modify your gait, then it slows you down. And at that point, I was like, you can't slow down. You need to be going as fast as you can, because this is like your only chance. So I actively, you know, I really focused on that and like kind of mentally blocked out the pain. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And I managed as kind of moving fairly freely. This was on the descents, you know, you need to try and make as much time as you possibly can on the descents. Nearly made an error dropping down into kind of the valley before the climb up to Ratjaw, but I just corrected it, which was lucky, because that could have been the end of everything. And then I climbed up to Ratjaw, and I kind of I think the people that were there at the tower, like I climbed up to the tower, before going down Ratjaw. But I think the people that were at the tower, you know, I thought they seemed super enthusiastic and thing. But again, I think the general consensus once I'd left was that there wasn't enough time for me to get back. But my overwhelming feeling from it was I was like really, like, you look at the video of me running through there, and I'm like definitely on like a roll. I'm like going for it. I've not given up. I'm really gunning for the finish. And at that point I was running again, you know, like I was really pushing it to try and get there. And what I was doing actually was, because it was quite hot, and like one thing I've found in the past, you know, just doing long distance hiking, is that one thing that can really help when you're really, really exhausted is to get in cold water and like go for a swim in a lake, like completely swimming. But I had so little time that I basically just dipped in like, and the kind of towards the end, I actually did remove my rucksack, but basically got in fully under the water, and I would do that in like each valley, and so that took me maybe like 60 seconds to do. But the advantage of it was that I felt like a new person, like relatively speaking, for the start of the climb. And I can guarantee that if I hadn't done that on those valleys, or those last 3 valleys, then there's no way that I would have finished, because I was so much quicker going up the hill. And that's I've known that for a long time, that cold water can do that to you, because it just kind of completely like refreshes you. It's not, you know, it
probably, you know, shocks the system in a way that impacts your brain too, right? Yeah. In the same way that cools you down and makes it physiologically easier to push. It probably wakes you up a little bit when you're 58 hours deep or something. Exactly, right?
Because they hit another nail on the head. One of the things at Barkley is when you start to get tired and it's warm, it starts to be really hard to focus on what you're doing. Like you forget, it's hard to kind of keep reminding yourself you're in a race and you need to keep going. But A, I had like so much adrenaline in the system, but B, these cold water dips definitely helped. Like I was, you know, I'd set off running from when I jumped out of the pool and type thing. So and then the final kind of descent was, I thought I had enough time, to be honest. I thought it was going to be okay. I thought I was going to have like maybe 5 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes at the bottom. And then it didn't happen like that. Then I kind of got to the final, I don't know, K, and I was like, I don't know exactly how long it was, but I'm guessing maybe it was about 8 minutes for that last kilometre. I don't know exactly, but anyway, it was too short for it to be comfortable, and I was running much faster than I would have liked to be running at that point. And then it was like an uphill run into the finish, and also it was really weird because usually there's a few people in this kind of, when you kind of get down into near the campsite on that road, there's usually a few people parked in the car park that you run through before you get on this last bit of trail, and there's kind of people around, but it was dead. It was completely like a ghost town, and that's because everybody was actually at the finish. But for me, it felt really weird. Yeah. And then I was like looking at a watch, and it was like so tight, and I was like, it almost felt like I'd already not made it, you know, like it was all so silent and like eerie, ghostly, like everybody had given up. And then obviously then I got to the actual point where you kind of turn up towards the gate. And then there was like a huge number of people, like relatively speaking for Barkley terms, all around the gate and all cheering. And this kid on a bike said to me, "You can do this." And then this other guy kind of ran up to me, he saw me and sort of started running towards me, and he was shouting at me, "Pump your arms, pump your arms." And I think he just was trying to keep me moving, and like it seemed like an impossible task to make it up the hill in those few minutes that I had left. But at the same time, in that, so all these scenarios went through my head, like Gary Robbins' finish, and the idea of just being a few seconds over and like having to do it all again. And I think at that point, I'd kind of left so much out there on the course, like so much effort, that was just too big a kind of, too big a thing to contemplate needing to do that. So I just thought you need to like give everything, absolutely everything. You need to kind of you need to just collapse. If you'll just run till you collapse, and if you make it to the gate, then you'll make it. And if you don't, then you don't make it. But at least you'll know you've tried everything you can possibly do. And at one point I was like, I was thinking, I can't run anymore at this point. Like I can't do it anymore. And then I sort of said to myself almost like, well, go faster then. If you can't do this pace, go faster. And it was like, and I actually did like increase the speed, and I was like, I'm going to get there faster if I run faster. But I still couldn't, I still had no oxygen, it was just, and also all I really could see was the gate, and everything else around me was just, it was just noise. And it was like this kind of thunder, it was clapping and shouting and whistling and cheering. And it felt like a kind of thousands of people were cheering me on.
There were, Jasmin. I was going to say that too, is like the internet exploded when the news came through and Keith Dunn's update came through. And then as the videos emerge of you in tempo pace coming up that hill with that almost imperceptible incline that you just, I don't know, to me just feels like an evil way to finish when you're 60 hours deep with only 99 seconds to spare. As you collapsed into the gate and hit the ground, did you have a sense of the gravity of which you had just achieved? I mean, obviously this has been a multi-year dream for you. When you tagged the gate, did it, I'm sure it takes a little time to sink in, but was there any immediate feelings of elation that you were finally able to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was desperately trying to breathe for a few moments, but already the thought. I mean, mainly, I guess I had this huge, overwhelming feeling of like I don't have to run anymore. I can just breathe now, which was like a joy. I mean, without wanting to like I mean, in some ways it was a bit like childbirth, yeah. So you go through this, like it's incredibly kind of challenging, but then suddenly it's over, and it's just that amazing feeling of relief as well as the joy of it, kind of the result. And it was a bit like that, without kind of wishing to sort of, kind of liken childbirth to Barkley too much. But basically, it was that kind of same kind of release of it all being over, and then the kind of joy of it being of having achieved it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So the kind of, and then I guess the enormity of what it meant as a woman sort of sank in more after that. But I'd gone there primarily because I wanted to see whether I could do it, and the kind of being a woman was definitely something that kind of was a factor in my head. The thought that I would be doing this for women everywhere to prove that that we can do. That it might be said that we can't do something, to show that we can in a way, but that wasn't the kind of primary reason for going there. So my first thought was just that this was something that I'd really wanted to do, to prove to myself, and I had done it, and that it was done, and I didn't need to do it again, and that everybody was really happy. So all those kind of things were going through my mind.
Awesome. So maybe building on that a little bit, and we can start winding down here in a few minutes. I have a couple more questions that I want to ask you, but like this did have a massive impact. And I know you're not somebody who like seeks attention. You're not seeking fame. And, I remember when you originally arrived on my radar was after the 2019 spine race, which was also just this massive moment where you became the focal point of attention. And this is now the second time really that's happened in your life, at least from my career. How do you deal with that attention and the overwhelming demand to do interviews like this with me? Is it uncomfortable for you, or are you feeling a genuine sense of pride that you did this seemingly impossible thing? And like you said, you representing, sort of like women's athletes around the world.
Yeah, I definitely feel really proud. I feel proud of myself in the sense that I've never dug that deep before. I left everything out there. I know I did. Like, I gave it absolutely everything. Even the spine, like I didn't dig as deep as this for the spine, for sure. Because when people ask me after the spine, is that your kind of biggest achievement? And yeah, like to other people, like it looked like it, and I was very proud of it. But there were other things that were competing as well in my mind in terms of how well I'd done and what I was most happy with. But this is now it, for sure. Like, this is where I left everything, regardless whether I made mistakes and things. In terms of my effort and my kind of perseverance, this was the kind of crowning moment so far of my running career. So I am super proud of it, and I'm proud of persisting. And I'm genuinely like delighted that I've been a source of inspiration to people, especially women, and kind of to get out there and kind of follow their dreams and try new things and just be active and enjoy sports. And, hopefully this will kind of inspire kids, especially girls, to stay in sport and that sort of thing. So for all those things, I'm kind of really delighted. In terms of all the interviews, like, I guess part of the reason I'm doing them is because I like making people happy. So when people ask me, I'm not very good at saying no. And I've never been very good at saying no. So I kind of try to prioritize. And then sometimes, like, when I get a bit jaded, I do start to say no to things. But that's part of the reason. But mainly the reason is that I think, I think it's people seem to be inspired by it. So I think it's a good thing if I can, tell the story and then, and if people seem to want to hear it. So I guess I'm doing it for that reason.
Well,
you're
thank
right.
you.
I'm not naturally, it's not like I've not done this to seek out the limelight, for sure.
Right.
But I'm glad I feel very privileged to be in a position where I can inspire people. And I feel like that comes with some responsibility. I think that's probably the best way of summarizing.
Well, thank you. As a fan, it is so apparent that it does come from an authentic place, and I will be reading and listening to every single interview that you do after this incredible thing.
You get bored, Stephen. Even I'm not sure when I reply to questions whether I already said it or not.
Yeah. So I wondered if there were any good stories with the other 4 finishers this year. Obviously, you guys will share this bond for life in all likelihood. If there was anything in your guys' post-Barkley delirium that stands out, any fun war stories or interactions with Ihor, John, Jared, or Greg that people would find entertaining?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm trying to kind of like summarize them in my kind of thoughts for myself. I mean, with Jared and Greg, I guess we spent most time together, it felt like, when we were going down this new section, which is like, it was just terribly brambly, and there was no like ideal way through. The loop 2, and I ran with Sebastian and John and Kelly and Ihor. Sebastian found an incredible line down through it. It was like magic, and I think it was just like maybe luck or just like incredible skill. But when we went down it with Jared and Greg, it was like a lot of basically getting stuck in like incredible brambles, and there was like, I guess, a lot of maybe inner cursing. But as Jared pointed out when we got to the bottom, he was like, our average speed during that section like dropped through the floor, so that was kind of memorable together. And then we made a bit of a mistake later on and sort of almost ended up climbing onto the wrong ridge. And actually, speaking to kind of John and Damien and things, they actually made the same mistake at that point later on as well. Well, kind of funny moments, I guess. There was a moment in the night when I was kind of following John Kelly, and he started making these noises, and it turns out that like this is John Kelly's renowned for making these noises, like kind of I don't know, like a stag making noises, kind of like big grunts. And I thought he was making these noises because he was finding it hard, and I was like feeling pretty rough at that point. So I sort of started joining in making these noises. And then it turned out afterwards it was just because he was falling asleep. So he makes these noises to keep himself awake. So I mean, these sorts of little things that you and I mean, you have all sorts of weird conversations as well out there. Like, I struggle to kind of recall them exactly now, but yeah, you have kind of, yeah. Damien gave me a kind of Kit Kat at one point, and we had a chat about Kit Kat. So like when I was kind of running out of food, I mean, there's all these like little moments that you'll remember forever, like when you needed that bit of extra food, and he like, they offer, like, what do you need? do you need anything that I've got that you, Eho was the same when I felt rubbish, and he said, do you need caffeine? Do you need salt? What do you need? So like incredible friendships. And I think, those moments that you share with these people are kind of remember for the rest of your life.
Awesome. Penultimate question for you. You've mentioned Damien a couple of times here. I also read in your Iron Far interview you describing Barkley as being this massive project, not only for you, but for your family. I wondered if you wanted to share any words about Damien, who I know is your friend and your coach, and who came painfully close to finishing this year, but was unsuccessful in his, I think it was his second or third attempt. And also, your family and them supporting you in this journey. If there's anything you want to say about Damien, your family, the sacrifices that they've made and how they've supported you in this amazing achievement.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to say. So firstly to Damien, like I'm super grateful for, he's coached me for years now. And he's not just a coach, he's a friend. That's why he coaches me, because I want somebody, I run for fun. I want somebody to coach me that I can talk to, that I enjoy, spending time with as a friend, that understands what it's like to have a family and to just be doing this ultimately for fun, who doesn't sack me when I go a bit kind of AWOL and do my own thing for a bit. But I'm super grateful to Damien. And I think, the fact that I came into Barkley so well prepared this year and feeling so good and confident was largely down to your kind of plan, and I think that went really well, so thank you so much for that. And I guess I would say I'm really sorry that it didn't work out for you this year. I mean, the fact that you've been twice to Barkley and managed to do 8 loops in that time is pretty incredible, and it surely is only a matter of time before it happens, and I really hope it happens next time so that you can put it to bed. But that would be my kind of for Damien. And for my family, my parents looked after the children while we were away. There's nowhere that I could go away unless I felt that they were completely happy and safe. I wouldn't be able to run a race like Barkley if I had any worries at all about them back home. So thank you to them, Jeff and Elena, for looking after the children, and for always supporting me and always making me believe, having me grow up believing that I was capable of anything that I set my heart to. Lastly, I guess thank you to my friends, and obviously thank you to everybody that was at Barkley. But I think lastly, the biggest thanks has to go to Conrad, my husband, who was there, who crewed me, who is my rock, who always knew exactly what I needed. He's completely unflappable. He just did exactly what I needed when I needed it. He doesn't say that much, but he's I think he's my biggest fan. So he is definitely the one that I need to give the biggest thanks to.
Beautiful. Jasmin, my final question that I ask everybody is, who is one person you admire inside or outside of sport? This person can be living or dead, and why do you admire that person?
I'm going to go a bit off track with this answer. I thought I've been asked quite a lot of times about kind of inspiration and admiration, and I'm going to say I'm inspired most in life by people who keep trying against all the odds. So the thing that comes into my mind is in the Dragon's Back in 2015 when I ran that race. It's a multi-day race, and every day I was kind of amongst the leaders finishing, and we had 16 hours to rest and recuperate and eat and then set off the next morning and the next day. And yet the people that were out longest, that literally came in seconds before the cutoff, they had maybe 6 hours before they had to get out again to try and maximize the amount of time they had the next day. And there was one particular person I remember that just about managed to make the cutoff every single day and set off at the minute the kind of bell sounded in the next morning. And they must have been sleeping for 3 or 4 hours a night and been out on the trail for, I don't know, 16, 20 hours. It was insane every day. And I remember on the last day running past them and they were like limping along. They were just hiking along and limping, but they were still going. And I thought, like, those are the people that that's the person that we should be celebrating at the end of this Dragon's Back, not me. They're the ones that should be getting the trophy and the kind of high five. So I've not answered your question with one single person, but I would just say that, like, I am immensely inspired by the people that keep going at the back of a race, or in the middle of the race, wherever it is. It's about the perseverance. It's about what you're doing in the face of what challenges you've got, and I think that's what inspires me most. So it's like seeing the grit and determination of the people that are struggling is what always inspires me most.
A fantastic place to end it. Jasmin, congratulations on this fantastic accomplishment. Thank you for the inspiration, and thanks also for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.